it's Reija and welcome to another video. Long time no see, it's been a little bit of a longer extended hiatus than I had planned, but I am officially back. And to get reacquainted with everyone after my break, I will be doing a rating wrap-up of all of the things that I have read so far in the year 2023, so my January and February reading wrap-up. I hope you will enjoy. So even though I have been quite slumpy with my reading during the start of the year, I am actually quite happy to have kicked everything off with a bang. So in January, my very first read of the year that I finished was Africa Risen, A New Era of Speculative Fiction. This is a short story anthology that was edited by Sheree, Renée, Oghenechovve, Ekpeki, and Zelda Knight. And I am actually planning on nominating a story or two from this collection in the Hugo Awards, because they are, like most of them are eligible in the short fiction categories. And I really enjoyed this. This had, obviously with all anthologies, there are hits and there are misses, and the hits and misses may be different for every reader. I personally really enjoyed this collection. It gave me a lot of food for thought. There were some really enjoyable stories that I'm thinking about. There were some gut punches that I'm thinking about. And I made a whole live show for the Swords and Sorcery Book Club that I will leave linked in the cards if you want to know my full thoughts on most of the stories that I thought were really excellent. Overall, I would say that this is very much worth the read. It does a lot of deconstructing of colonialist tropes and also deconstructing this idea of Africa as a monolith, and also deconstructing this idea of African diasporic identities versus African people living on the continent, this sort of rift or animosity between the different peoples. It sort of deconstructs those ideas as well. It's all about cooperation, family, kinship, and all of that. Very highly recommend. Next thing I finished in January was Sophie and the Bone Song by Adrienne Tooley. I listened to this one on audio, and this is a standalone young adult sapphic fantasy story. And I thought that this was really interesting. It's basically this idea of someone being groomed into a certain position since childhood, and not sort of living up to that, and how, or rather something happening where this idea that you've put yourself through these grueling feats and this sort of toxic relationship with a parental figure, that this parental figure has groomed you to this specific position all your life, and then everything falls from beneath your feet because you cannot attain the level of perfection needed and cannot attain the position. And it's all about this inner conflict, and also coming to terms with this idea that even though someone has raised you, doesn't mean that they've always had the best interests of you specifically in their hearts. And it's very much like an enjoyable travel log, because it's about these two characters going on a trip. It's a little bit of an enemies to lovers thing, and it's actually really interesting, really good. I gave this 3.5 stars, mostly because there were some pacing issues, especially in the middle and end of the book. The book kind of doesn't let the climax really sit enough time. I felt like the ending was a little bit rushed. It could have needed some more fleshing out, and there were also a couple of side characters which I hope would get some more page time, but unfortunately, as this is a shorter young adult book, there just wasn't the space to do it. But I felt like given even 30 pages more would have pushed the envelope a little bit. And allowed for some of these side characters especially to breathe a little, because my main gripe with the story is that it feels very much contained to these like basically 3 central characters, and because of that the world feels kind of small and cramped. That's my only complaint. Other than that, I highly enjoyed it, and I am going to be nominating this for a Lodestar Award. And then for some manga that I read in January, I read the volumes 7 and 8 of Sweat and Soap by Kintetsu Yamada, and translated by Matt Treyvaud, I think. Yes, translated by Matt Treyvaud. And we are once again following the adventures and domestic bliss of Natori and Asako. And the thing is that in these 2 volumes we actually get to kind of the meat of Asako's characterization and her sort of trauma and overcoming her insecurities. We see her deal with like friendship struggles and also like confronting a former school bully and how that has affected her still. And I felt that there was much more focus on Asako's characterization specifically, which I really enjoyed actually, because a lot of the time it is Natori who is kind of the sort of focal point of a lot of their like not only relationship things, but also like in terms of like getting some character development. I feel like Asako always has a little bit of a risk of becoming a shrinking violet in her own story, even though she is the main protagonist. So I gave Sweat and Soap Volume 7 3.5 stars, and Sweat and Soap Volume 8 4 stars. 8 specifically goes over like Asako's more like inner struggles, and I highly enjoyed this. So yeah, almost done with the series. There's like a couple more volumes that I need to read, and then I'm done with this. And then I read Himawari House by Harmony Becker. This one I heard from Shannon from That's So Poe, and I'm so glad that she talked about this because I never would have known that this was a thing. Harmony Becker has illustrated the George Takei graphic memoir We Were the Enemy, which I want to read. I have had it on loan from the library one time, but I didn't manage to squeeze it in to my reading plans at the time. But now that I've read Himawari House, I really enjoyed Harmony Becker's art style actually, so now I want to give We Were the Enemy another try as well. Himawari House is basically a story about a group of different Asian like women, especially navigating immigrant life in Japan, and especially it is told from the point of view of a Japanese American girl who comes to stay in Japan for a year and live in this boarding house, and also like reacquaint herself with her culture, reacquaint herself with like her Japanese side of the family, and also relearn the language because she hasn't managed to maintain it while living in the US because of severe anxiety relating to like othering, bullying, and also like this pressure to assimilate to the American culture, or the US culture I should say. And she is the main protagonist, and then there's also a character who is a South Korean immigrant, and also another character who is from Singapore, and they live in this boarding house with 2 other characters who are both Japanese. I really enjoyed this story. It is all about finding your own place, finding a semblance of home, finding community, and what I liked most about this was the way it dealt with language. So each of these characters speaks with a different kind of accent. Accents are celebrated in this, which I found to be really amazing and great, because sometimes there's this risk of like, especially in like from a Western lens, where accents are made to make fun of other people, made to make fun of the people with the accent. But here the accents are celebrated. They are like a tool of like expression, and it was nice. Also, this incorporates like Korean and Japanese into the text as well, especially with like the main character not fully understanding Japanese. There are these bits where the text will be in Japanese, and there are bits kind of blocked out where she doesn't understand, and there's like a subtitle underneath of what it means, but there is no romanization. It's all in like actual kanji and katakana. And I found it really interesting to kind of read the Japanese text and see how it was translated in the English version or the English subtitle, and I noticed this relatability with the character in that sense, because there were so many moments where I didn't recognize the kanji, and I had to like stop and like wrap my head around what I was reading. So in that sense, I felt more close to the character because of that whole thing with the language, and I thought that it was such an ingenious way to do that and to explore that like bilingual identity and stuff. Yeah, I would really recommend it. There's also a really nice romance and good exploration of like anxiety and shyness as well, and introversion. So yeah, I really highly recommend this. I gave this 4.5 stars. And then moving on to February, and first I will start off with a DNF. So at work we started a book club, and the first book to be picked was We Are Legion, We Are Bob by Dennis E. Taylor. And I did not rate this because I did not finish it, because I got to about page 50-60 mark before I decided to DNF the book, because I couldn't get on with the writing style. Now, the thing is that this is a science fiction story about a person who gets kind of like, who cryogenically freezes has their body cryogenically frozen, and then dies and wakes up in the future, where their consciousness has essentially been uploaded into their consciousness has been made into an artificial intelligence. And every time they sort of die, they get sort of like re-uploaded, and it is all about the damage this does to their psyche. And first of all, great concept in theory. I will applaud the author for that. But this book already started me on the wrong foot, because it is in my least favorite POV, first person, omniscient first person narration. So it is a first person narrator who kind of already has all of the facts about everything. So that was the first thing that really irked me. And then the second thing is that this main character is essentially a Silicon Valley tech bro. Think kind of Elon Musk. So his character arc is that, or the start of his character is that he made a lot of money by having this Silicon Valley startup that was really successful. He sold his company and made a lot of money, and then dies before he can enjoy it, etc., etc. And that's like, number two is that I was not in the headspace to read about this sort of character at that time. Could I, in the future, be willing to try We Are Legion, We Are Bob again? Possibly. But this was not the moment. And I was like struggling to get through with the writing because of this. So I decided to give up. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, do try it out. I personally could not stomach it at this time, so I fully gave up and DNF'd it. Moving on to my February reads, I read The House of Rust by Khadija Abdallah Bajaber, and this was a story that is very vibey. It is all about this bustling community and fishing village in Mombasa. And it's all about this woman trying to find her own way, trying to communicate to her family what she wants, trying to go against societal pressures, and then finding adventures. It is also about a daughter searching, going on a hunt for her father. It's really reminiscent to me in terms of not in terms of how it's executed, but the general vibe I get of for example, Snow Queen, this type of heroine's journey where they go on a journey. They get approached by individuals. They have to fulfill certain tasks. Their boundaries and their consent are constantly under attack, and they have to sort of protect that. There's like a talking cat character, which I really enjoyed. And I don't know, there was just something really magical about this. It felt really intimate and really like, I don't know, there's just something, like things that came to mind for me were like Howl's Moving Castle, The Snow Queen, also like these various East Asian like fairy tales that I've learned as a kid. For example, Aladdin comes to mind as well. Like, so yeah, there's like plenty of these things that share similar tropes, but like this was just such a rich story. First of all, the characterization in this story is excellent. Like, even the tiniest bit side character like feels like a fully realized person with their own wants and needs. You will hate and you will love certain characters based on how they act, and you feel like you know them. Especially there's this one scene where the main character has to entertain guests at her grandmother's house because her father has gone missing. Everyone thinks he's dead, so people are kind of coming in to like pay respects, and there is this scene with these aunties and the grandmother, and it is excellent because they are all just like bickering with each other and like showing off their prized daughters and like granddaughters, and yeah, it was excellent, and also reminded me of my own family for some reason. So yeah, I just felt that this had such good vibes, in a sense. It was sometimes a very difficult read because it is very wordy, and it's also like very ponderous. The writing style is very like slow. And then you kind of get a whiplash at the end of the book because the book just utterly goes into gear and the ending just like happens. Because like up until that point you are in this very slow progression of things, and then the ending just happens in like 3 chapters. So my biggest gripe with this book would be that the ending felt very rushed, and that kind of hampered down my reading experience, because everything up to that point was really good, and then I just didn't get like satisfied, like the ending didn't feel satisfactory. So I gave this 3 stars. I would recommend this if you are in the lookout for a story about an independent heroine who is allowed to fail and who is allowed to feel like she is someone who is very insecure about herself and grows into herself, and also grows into her own desires and what she wants. So she becomes progressively more stubborn and more like assertive about her own wants, and that is excellent to see. So yeah, House of Rust, I gave this 3 stars and would recommend it, even though it wasn't my personal favorite. And then I read The Mirror Season by Anna-Marie McLemore. This one I listened to on audio, and I will say that I maybe should have consulted some of the content warnings before I went into this, because, oh boy, this book. First of all, it does have content warnings straight at the beginning, before you even go in. But what I mean is that even though I knew generally what the book was about, I still wasn't quite ready for what was inside. I do feel like there is an annoying aspect in this book, which is just my own personal pet peeve, which is that of miscommunication, and also this sort of hiding information from another character. It is a character moment, so I understand why it was there. It is just my I personally don't like the use of that trope, because I see it done all the time. I felt like there could have been some stronger character work done if the whole sort of miscommunication aspect of the narrative was handled differently. Like, I understand the hiding of the information and what that meant for the characters, but I just felt like this, like, there was this moment that felt like there was this deliberate misunderstanding on the part of another character that felt a little out of character. But also because the story is dealing with a lot of like trauma and also processing trauma, I can't really fault that. It's just my own personal like annoyance with those kinds of story conventions most of the time. So anyway, what this book is about is essentially two people having gone through sexual assault and finding not only comfort and solace within, like, with each other, becoming friends and forming a relationship, etc., but also like finding strength and finding the strength and power to overcome what happened to them. It also has like a magical realism element. This is kind of a very loose retelling / reimagining of Snow Queen, and it also references Snow Queen heavily inside the text, so it's like very intertextual. And yeah, I quite enjoyed this. I gave this 4.5 stars. It is one of my favorite Anna-Marie McLemore books. I would probably still say that Wild Beauty is my favorite, followed by The Mirror Season, and then I would put Blanca y Roja, and those are the 3 Anna-Marie McLemores I have read so far, but they are one of my favorite authors. I really love their work. So yeah, I think The Mirror Season was pretty well paced. It didn't overstay its welcome. It leaves the story with just enough like resolution to be satisfactory, but not too much so that it feels unrealistic and kind of saccharine. It allows things to stay messy. It allows these characters to sort of leave the story better than they came into the story as, but still leaving kind of like a work in progress, in if that makes sense. The book ends with these characters not having fully gone through their character arc that they were set on at the beginning of the book. And I found that interesting. So yeah, Mirror Season was excellent. And then I read the first 3 volumes of Chainsaw Man by Tatsuki Fujimoto and translated by Amanda Haley. So I read Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3 of Chainsaw Man during February. And I also watched the entire anime. I was late to the party because the anime finished airing at the end of December, but I got myself a Crunchyroll subscription now, so now I can watch all of the anime that all the cool kids have been watching since last year. Anyway, Chainsaw Man is interesting in that it has been hyped to, like, hyped sky high. Like, it has been hyped up to the heavens. And I was kind of hesitant about it because I have this character flaw where if a thing is really hyped, I start resisting looking into it or watching it or reading it because I just like feel that it cannot live up to it. And Chainsaw Man actually, like, I really enjoyed it. It has been one of the more enjoyable things that I have read in a long time. First of all, it has a character who comes to the story from abject poverty. This is a character that has had to literally sell their organs, like some of their organs, in order to survive, in order to make money. They are incredibly indebted to a criminal organization that extorts them for services, and they are still a child. And the only way that Denji is able to survive and make a living is because he has formed a pact with a devil. A little cute devil named Pochita. And because of that, he is able to be a devil hunter, essentially, and hunt devils and give the devil corpses to the criminal organization that then, after deducting their exorbitant debtor, interests from his service rates. He gets a tiny bit of allowance that allows him to maybe sometimes get toast in order to survive and eat. That's the start of the story. That is like the first thing. And then things happen, and Denji has to make a full pact with Pochuta in order to become the titular Chainsaw Man. Like, he becomes sort of half devil, half human himself. And he then gets taken in by the public safety organization of like devil hunters, and he gets taken in as like a public safety devil hunter. And that's the whole thing. And it is all about found family. It is all about like this, like what it means to be human, what it means to have human connection, what it means to be treated with dignity and humanity. And I thought that it was really interesting. It's kind of like it has this weird thing where it's kind of retro-futuristic, because it takes place like in this sort of weird alternative 80s/90s before the Soviet Union has collapsed, but also might take place slightly after, in case like in a world where the Soviet Union didn't collapse. But it's very like kind of retro-futuristic. You don't see cell phones anywhere. You have that, like the world is basically set up in like a sort of pseudo 90s or pseudo early 90s, 80s. And Denji is essentially the only character who is a minor. Every single other character seems to be an adult. This is categorized as young adult. It appears in Shonen Jump magazine, which is target demographic is teenage boys. And it doesn't feel like a young adult title. It is very, very adult. Like, there are some scenes in the first 3 volumes that I think kind of put even Berserk to shame in certain aspects, in how kind of fucked up they are. And I'm also kind of living for the fact that this has 2 of the most detestable female characters who are both like absolute riots. Like, Power is basically a demon. She's a fiend. She's a pathological liar. She has like a really bad god complex, and like is like such a wacky character. And then you have Himeno, who is has this very kind of obsessive and coercive personality, and is kind of manipulative and also very whiny about it. And I just like that these characters exist, and they are also like not portrayed in the way where you are expected to like them for all they are. Like, but they also have likable qualities. I feel like sometimes there's this, especially in manga and especially in shonen manga, there's this annoying tendency to put especially female characters on this pedestal of like not only needing to be there for sex appeal, but also to be this sort of idealized kind of image of girlhood for boys to idolize. And these, like the women in Chainsaw Man, are not that, and I love it. So yeah, I have been really enjoying Chainsaw Man. The start is a little bit uneven. Like, I gave volume 1 3.5 stars, and volume 2 3 stars. So the start was a little bit rocky, a little bit unevenly paced, but then Chainsaw Man volume 3 was a 4-star for me. Very good. And I will say that I like that it is a very much a show don't tell focused story, because like Tatsuki Fujimoto has stated in numerous interviews that he doesn't enjoy info dumping. He would rather show you via the actual picture, and if it can't be explained in a like sentence or 2, if the concept can't be explained in a sentence or 2, like it is not worth it. So I like that approach, because it feels like the series like allows the art to be the center point, And it also makes it very streamlined and also allows the story to move in a very good pace, because you don't have to stop everything to explain these concepts of like these devils and stuff. Because it is very simplified, and then he just builds up on top of all of the things that he has already done. So I find it really enjoyable so far, and I am continuing on with my read already in March, reading the next volume. So yeah, Chainsaw Man has been a really good surprise for me. And then the final read that I read in February was Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk. This is a novella that I listened to on audio, and I actually really enjoyed it. I also gave this one 4 stars. Very enjoyable. It is all about this like woman who is a kind of detective, but she's also a sorcerer, and she does like these consultancy gigs for this woman who hires her to do these like various sort of dangerous assignments that no other person will touch. It is stock full of biblical references. A lot of the world building of this like magical world rests on the shoulders of like Judaism and also Judaistic beliefs, Christianity. There's angels, there's demons, there's devils, and like the magic itself seems to like have a lot to do with like demonic and angelic contracts and stuff. It's also like set in a kind of like late like jazz era period, so it's like 30s, set in the 30s. It has a sapphic romance at the center, and it is a nice piece of alternative history, urban fantasy, noir, and I really enjoyed it. It manages to have a very satisfactory ending without the expense of sort of pulling the rug from under the reader. How to explain it? Basically, without spoiling the ending, you have this concept of a character who is set on a certain path, and by the end of the story, the author had the option to do a reset, but didn't, and that was good. I felt like it would have really cheapened the story if that reset would have happened. I really enjoyed the character work, and I really enjoyed the audio narration especially. I really liked listening to this on audio. So yeah, those were all of the things that I read in the months of January and February. Now I will go over a little bit of statistics. So in January I read 5 books, in February I read 7 books. These stats are not counting webtoons, because I am constantly reading webtoons, but I have just chosen not to really quantify them in my stats because they are ongoing. It is very hard to track how much I've been reading them. So pages read during January was 1,297, pages read during February 863. Obviously I read a lot of comics, so that amps up the page count. I also listened to 28 hours of audio narration in January, and also listened to 16 hours of audio narration during February. Yeah, that's pretty much it. In January I read 1 audiobook, and in February I read 2 audiobooks and 4 physical. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Here you can see which dates I essentially read the most. Like there were some dates that I didn't read anything at all. I'm trying to be better at this in March. So fingers crossed that I will be battling and winning this reading slump that I've been struggling with for the past 2.5 months. Anyway, there you have it. This has been my reading wrap-up for January and February. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you got this far, if you got to the end of this long-ass ranty wrap-up, please leave me some sort of graph or stats related emoji so that I know that you are here, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye bye!